Hi everyone, I hope that you guys are doing okay. Today we'll be having semicolons, colons, and commas. So first you log in using the aplusstudent.com and then you click on your name here. So we'll scroll here and then we'll click on the semicolons, colons, and commas. We have two lessons here which we would complete today. Use semicolons and commas to separate clauses. So this is the first lesson. So we'll be starting here. It says that you should use a comma to separate two independent clauses that are joined with a coordinating conjunction, such as and or but so. So the first is that you have to use a comma to separate two independent clauses that are joined with a coordinating conjunctions. They are joined with the coordinating conjunctions such as and or but or so. Okay, so that's it. And when we say independent clause, we just mean that sentences that can stand alone, they do not need help, so they stand on their own. Okay, and then however, if the coordinating conjunction joins verb or verb phrase in a compound predicate, a comma should not be used. Okay, so you have to take note that if the coordinating conjunction is joining verb or verb phrases in a compound predicate, a comma should not be used in that sentence. So we have some examples. Wyatt was reserved around new people, but he was hardly shy. Now we have the comma and we have the conjunction here. So this was the first part where we have to join the comma and the conjunctions together. So next off we have Wyatt was reserved around new people but was hardly shy. So now the difference is that there's no he here, so it's just like joining the sentences together. So you do not need to add comma. But whenever it's an independent clause and then it joins two coordinating conjunctions, you have to add a comma, just like the first one. So we have the conjunction but, also, and. So those are the conjunctions that we have. Then next we have also use a comma to separate a dependent clause and an independent clause when the dependent clause comes first. So let's go over this again. Use a comma to separate a dependent clause and an independent clause when the dependent clause comes first. So if you have a sentence and then you have dependent clause, you have independent clause. But then the dependent clause comes first, the first part of the sentence, then you have to use a comma to separate both of them. Okay? So these dependent clauses usually start with a subordinating conjunction, such as after, although, because, unless, if. So we have a lot of subordinating conjunction. So once the subordinating conjunction is starting the sentence, then you have to put a comma to separate the first and then the second. So although Wyatt was reserved around new people, he was hardly shy. So he was hardly shy is the independent clause. Then the other part is the dependent clause. Okay. Now that's it for like the commas. Now we're moving on to using semicolons to connect two closely related independent clauses that are not joined with a coordinating conjunction. So when you have independent clauses, Okay, like two closely related independent clause that are not joined with a coordinating conjunction, you have to use a semicolon. So let's say that independent clauses, they can stand on their own, they already make sense. So once you have two of them joined together without coordinating conjunction, you have to make sure that you use a semicolon. So Wyatt was hardly shy, semicolon, he was simply reserved around new people. So all these are like independent clauses. So since they are independent clause and there was no coordinating conjunction or comma, you have to put semicolon. Also use a semicolon to connect two independent clauses that are joined with a conjunctive adverb, such as consequently, however, or therefore. So you guys know that we have some words that come and then you have to see however, you see consequently, and all those things. Good. So you have to use semicolon. Okay, so two independent clauses that are joined with a conjunctive adverb. So instead of the coordinating conjunction, they are joined with a conjunctive adverb. Then you have to use semicolon. Like Wyatt was hardly shy, semicolon. Nevertheless, a comma, he was reserved around new people. So that's it. This part here, this part here is a independent clause. The other part is independent clause as well, but they were joined with like a conjunctive adverb. So you have to put your comma before that conjunctive adverb. Okay. I hope that you guys get this. If you have any questions, you can leave your question on the chat. So let's look at some examples. So the word soccer originated in Britain, but today the British uniformly call the sport football. When soccer gained popularity in America in the 1980s, the British wanted to differentiate themselves. Consequently, the teams called the team the term soccer fell out of favor with them. Okay. So now, if you can look at this, the sentence is joined by two like independent clauses, but there's a mistake in this sentence because we have where we got like the consequently, which is the conjunctive adverb. So you have to remember that if it's joined by the conjunctive adverb, then we have to put a semicolon before, but a semicolon was not added. So look at it here. You have to make sure that you put a semicolon here. Then airplane food has a reputation for being unappetizing, but the food itself may not be responsible. Researchers have discovered that high altitude and decreased humidity dull our ability to detect flavors. Okay? Now, if you look at this sentence, we have here where we got the but. So, but is a coordinating conjunction. So, we have to make sure that we put a comma before a coordinating conjunction. So, if you're having a coordinating conjunction, you have to make sure that you put a comma before that. It doesn't work without having commas. So we also have, if you ever travel to Greece, be sure to visit the beautifully designed Acropolis museum with its spectacular collection of ancient Greek artifacts. So we have to check here. What is the mistake? So we have if you ever travel to Greece. So if is a subordinating conjunction, so that means it's coming before the dependent clause. I remember that it says that if we have dependent clause in front, we have to make sure that we put a comma to separate the two of them. Okay, so I hope that you guys get me, and if you have any question, you can leave your questions on the chat. So we'll move on to the test now. So it says that add a comma or semicolon if needed. Otherwise, submit the text without any additional punctuation. So you can add a comma if you need. If you don't need it, then just ignore. Don't add the comma. So groundwater comes from underground reservoirs called the aquifers. Then we have an empty space here, and we rely on these sources to meet half of our water needs in the United States. So now we have a coordinating conjunction here, which is joining two independent clauses. It's joining the two independent clause. And since it's joining the two independent clause, we have to make sure that there's a comma before that. Okay, so usually you have to make sure that you have a comma before your independent clause. Now we also have Wild Leaks is a whistleblower website where people anonymously report illegal wildlife trade. The site may prove effective in the fight against wildlife crime. However, it requires internet access in order to be useful. Now, reading this whole sentence, we have however here. However is a conjunctive adverb, and if you remember clearly, before the conjunctive adverb, we need to have a semicolon. So it doesn't work without semicolon. So a semicolon is needed here. So this first one should be the answer because it has a semicolon before the however. Okay. Shrek, a New Zealander sheep, went 6 years without being shorn. We have a space here. So his first weighed 60 pounds when it was finally cut. Okay, so now his fleece weighed 60 pounds when it was finally cut. And we have so here. So it's a coordinating conjunction. So we need to have a comma. You need to take notes that there's always the comma before the coordinating conjunction. So if there's no comma, that means your answer is incorrect. Airplane food has a reputation for being unappetizing. Then we have a space here. Then we have but the food itself may not be responsible. Researchers have discovered that high altitude and decreased humidity dull our ability to detect the flavors. So we have where we got the coordinating conjunction, and before that coordinating conjunction, we didn't have a comma. And we've said this that before a coordinating conjunction, you need to have a comma. So if there's no comma, that means your sentence is incorrect. So this one. So before Miss Rivera saw the Beetroot National Forest, that she had no idea how stunning the landscape is in Idaho. So this now is two independent clauses. And remember that we said that if we have two independent clauses, we need to make sure that we have a semicolon. So a semicolon will be added here. Okay. So we have that scientists believe tornadoes form due to high relative humidity and significant wind changes in the lowest region of the atmosphere. Furthermore, is a conjunctive adverb. Tornadoes only form if downdrafts are present in just the right part of the storm. So, furthermore, is a conjunctive adverb, and of course, we need to have a semicolon before that. So, semicolon here. Then, as Richard chopped the cilantro for the chili, dash I shredded the cheese for the quesadillas. So, there should be our answer. So, we put a comma. Okay. Then we have the department store does not grant refunds after 60 days. However, items may still be returned for store credit. Now we have however, and however is what? However is a conjunctive adverb, and we need to add the semicolon before that. Okay, so it should be this one. So, since the Maya of Central America began eating a Western diet high in sugar in the 1950s, their rate of diabetes has surged. So, we put a comma to separate the two independent clauses. Okay? So I hope that you guys understand this. If you have any questions, you can let me know as well. Okay. Until humans began cultivating plants and animals for food about 10,000 years ago, all people obtained their food by hunting, um, gathering, and fishing. So, so we have all people. We have two independent clauses, so we have to make sure that we put the comma to separate both of them. Okay. Okay. Relative to its body length, the tube-lipped nectar bat has the longest tongue of any known mammal. The bat is about 2 inches long, but its tongue is more than 3 inches in length. So let's see where we need to correct. Okay, so we have a coordinating conjunction here, which is the but. So before the but, you all know that we need to make sure that we have a comma and not a semicolon. So we have a comma. Okay, so that's it for this test. We still have some more questions, and you have to make sure that you answer that. If you've not done this test before, you answer the questions. And if you do not understand, you have to make sure that you watch this again from the beginning, just so that you get a clear explanation of what you have to do. Okay, so let's move on to the next lesson. So we move on to the next lesson, which is use semicolon, colons, and commas with list. So we'll be using this one for list. So it says to use a colon to introduce a list after an independent clause. If a list does not follow an independent clause, do not use punctuation to introduce the list. So if you want to introduce a list and then that list follows is an independent clause, so you have to make sure that you put a semicolon to introduce that list. But if it isn't an independent clause, so you do not put any punctuation to introduce that. So we have my parents have visited much of Western Europe. So that's an independent clause telling us that your parents have visited um, much of Western Europe. Okay, so we have to introduce the other part with the colon because the beginning is an independent clause. So we have Austria, Belgium, France, and all of that. Then we also have my parents have visited much of Western Europe, including. So it said including. So since it said including, that means it isn't an independent clause. So we do not need to put any comma to introduce them. We just move on with the sentence like that. Okay. Use commas to separate three or more items in a series. So if you have a series, you have to use comma to separate the series. Okay? So you use commas to separate this series. Then we have put a comma after each item in this list except for the last one. So of course, if we have a series, we have to make sure that we put comma to separate this series. Okay? But we do not put comma for the last one. The last one does not need to have any comma whatsoever. Okay. So we also have our speakers will be Kelvin O'Malley, Rachel Steen, and Linda Wu. So you can see that after Kelvin we have a comma, after Rachel we have a comma, but after like the conjunction and here we do not have a comma. So we do not add a comma after that. Okay, so yeah. Then moving on, use semicolons to separate items in a series when using commas would be unclear, such as when one or more item in a series already contains comma. So if you already have maybe a sentence and it comes with a lot of series, like it has so much series in it, then you do not have to use comma in all of them. You can just substitute and then you can add some let's say some semicolons, okay, so that the sentence will be clear. If you don't do that, you see that the sentence is unclear and people will not understand what you're writing or what you're doing. So we have our speaker will be Kelvin O'Malley, so an English professor. So Kelvin, then the next thing tells us who Kelvin is. He's an English professor. So you have to put a semicolon after that. Okay. And then Rachel Steen, a print journalist. So you see that it also tells us who Rachel is. Then Linda, a blogger. So it tells us like what they are. So we have to necessarily add the semicolon. Okay. One or more of the items in the series already contains comma. Separating the items with commas would be unclear. So imagine that we have comma for the name, comma for the profession again. It's gonna make it very unclear. So the most suitable thing to do is you just add a semicolon. So you should complete the sentence with semicolons. Semicolons makes them like more understandable. So whoever will be reading this would understand what you're writing. Okay. So let's look at some examples. If you have any question, you can just send on the chat and ask. So some add comma, semicolon, or colon if needed. Otherwise, submit the text without changing anything. Some of history's most famous spices include uh, Francis. Okay, The spies include Francis, who spied for Queen Elizabeth. So you see that they gave us the name for Francis and then who he spied for. And then Nathan Hale, who spied during the Revolutionary War. So these are like incorrect because after you give the name of the spy, you have to give like who they spied for. So you have to make sure that you put semicolon to differentiate them so that whoever is reading this text can understand. Then we have actor Josh Brolin has appeared in several notable films, including 1985's cult classic The Goonie No Country for Old Men, a film from acclaimed director Ethan and Joel Cohen and Oliver Stone. Okay, so it's already tells us like okay, this person appeared in this film and then there's another film, so they're like separated. Okay, everybody has like what they did, who directed it, so you have to put semicolon to separate all of them so that it can be clear enough. Then Jared wrote an article on preserving perishable food using several sources. So now the question 3, remember it says that if you want to introduce like a list and then it starts with an independent clause, you have to make sure that you put your semicolon. So this is an independent clause, so you have to put your colon to like introduce the items. Okay, so moving on. Okay, so this was in a tutorial and this has to do with the spice, and you have to ensure that you add the necessary comma where needed. So let's see. Okay, let's go with the first part. Okay, so yeah. Okay, an unrelenting drought in California has drained lakes, rivers, and snowpacks. So the state now relies on groundwater to meet demand. Now this is introducing some items. Okay, some list. Okay, so we have to ensure that we put commas, but we do not put comma in the last one. Okay. So, and again, if you look at these two options, there's a comma after the conjunction, and comma doesn't come after the conjunction, it comes before. So, the first one is the correct option because whenever you want to put a comma to separate like list, you have to make sure that you put your comma before the conjunction. According to data from 2011 and earlier, some 20 to 32% of wild caught seafood imported into the United States was from unregulated, illegal, and unreported pirate fishing source. So this is also like telling us about a link. Okay, so it has like a list of all the things that were linked. So you have to make sure that you choose the right one. This one says that you put the and after, but let's click on this one so that you can see what I'm saying. Okay, so this is the wrong one because you can see that the comma comes after and like I've said, it doesn't come after, it comes before. So if ever you maybe are not sure, you clicked on the wrong answer, you can just scroll down again and read it, and you can see like all the explanation all together, and you can understand better. So, if you love literature, you would likely enjoy visiting Shakespeare and Company, a bookstore in Paris. So, now this is coming like, when we have like lots of comma and then it's unclear. So, this comes with like the company and then the location. So, you have to make sure that you put semicolon to differentiate them. So, we'll check and see which is the correct one, correct option to click on. Okay. You would likely enjoy visiting Shakespeare and Company, a bookstore in Paris, France. Then we have Semicolon, Yasnaya, Pollyanna, Leo's Tolston estate in Russia, and Henry. So this one. So in Russia, then you have semicolon and Henry David. You continue, okay? So you cannot say Russia and Henry. That's incorrect. So the second one is wrong. You have to make sure you look at them carefully to see which one is the right answer. Inspired by President Franklin D. Roosevelt's 1941 Four Freedom State of the Union address, painter Norman Rockwell painted four pictures: freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from want, and freedom from fear. So let's see, this is like so introducing like an independent clause, so you have to make sure that you put your colon at the right place to introduce. So now for paintings freedom, we have a colon like after freedom, which is incorrect. If you click on this, it's wrong. It's supposed to be like the painting, and then from that you have the introduction of all the freedoms. So the second one is the most suitable answer. So the Vision Center offers a complete range of optical service and products, including routine eye exam, contact lenses, a large selection of fashionable and affordable frames, and industrial safety eyewear. So this said, including, so it's not like introducing a independent clause. So let's look. Okay, this one separates contact lenses, but contact lenses are like supposed to be together, but this particular one was separated. So we have to click on the second. Geodesy is the science of measuring and studying its orientation in space, geometric space, shape, and gravity field. So let's look at this. Okay, so you can see the comma here. Gravity field is like joined together. And remember that the comma is supposed to come like before the conjunction. Comma doesn't come after. According to Miss Coleman, the best summer theaters are the Stratford Festival in Ontario, Canada, the Festival International de Toro in Caracas, Venezuela, and the New York Mexico Theater Festival in New York City. So this is like introducing different festivals. So we have to check carefully. So we have the first. The best summer theaters at the Stratford Festival in Ontario, Canada. The Festival International de Teatro in Caracas. Okay. Okay, so it's supposed to be this one. This one has a colon after New York, and a colon shouldn't be there. So we click on the first one. So this one, it says that when the Canes purchased their home, it needed a new roof, new siding and windows, a new electrical system, and new plumbing. So let's see what's the right answer for this is. Okay. Okay, so this was like in our tutorial already. So it's giving us like different spies. So we just have to note them, and we have to use a semicolon to like separate all of them. Okay, so that's it for like this lesson. You have like few more questions left, so you can complete this lesson. If you haven't done this before, you can do this. Make sure that you complete it. If you get on it and you don't understand, you can watch this live from the beginning again. And yes, I hope that you get to finish this lesson. So do have a good night, everybody, and see you tomorrow. Bye, guys.